The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip across the dusty square, and Dalton Shepherd felt his stomach turn as another orc was dragged onto the wooden platform in chains. He had come to the frontier town of Greyhill to purchase livestock, not witness this grotesque spectacle, but the slave auction had been scheduled alongside the cattle sales, and the crowd had pushed him forward until he stood near the front, unable to look away from the horror unfolding before him. The war between the human kingdoms and the orc clans had ended 3 years ago, but its ugliest legacy persisted in these border towns where captured orcs were sold like animals to work fields, mines, or worse. Dalton had fought in that war. He had killed orcs and watched his brothers in arms die at their hands. He had earned his small farm with his veteran's grant and spent the last 2 years trying to forget the screams, the blood, the senselessness of it all. He had no love for orcs, but this violated something fundamental in him. The orc woman on the platform looked half dead. Her green skin was marked with old scars and fresh bruises, her leather clothing torn and filthy. Iron shackles bit into her wrists and ankles, and her black hair hung in matted tangles around her face. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with the athletic build common to her people, though malnutrition had clearly taken its toll. Her small tusks protruded from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears twitched at every sound from the jeering crowd. "This one's been nothing but trouble," the auctioneer announced, yanking on the chain attached to her collar. "Won't work, won't obey, tried to escape twice. But she's young and strong enough if you break her properly. We will start the bidding at 50 silver. The crowd muttered, but no hands rose. 50 silver was too much for a slave with a reputation for defiance. 40 silver, the auctioneer amended, frustration creeping into his voice. Still nothing. The orc woman stood with her head bowed, swaying slightly on her feet. Dalton wondered when she had last eaten or slept. 30 silver. "Come now, gentlemen. She will make a fine field hand once you teach her obedience." The crowd remained silent. Several men laughed and made crude suggestions about what she might be useful for instead. Dalton's hands clenched into fists at his sides. 20 silver. This is robbery, I tell you. 20 silver for prime orcish stock. A farmer Dalton recognized from the northern holdings raised his hand lazily. 10 silver and not a copper more. Probably die within the month anyway. The auctioneer looked ready to argue, then shrugged. 10 silver then. Going once, going twice, Dalton's voice cut through the square before he could stop himself. 1 gold coin. Every head turned toward him. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 1 gold coin was worth 100 silver, an absurd price for any slave, let alone one who had failed to fetch even 10 silver moments before. "Did you say 1 gold coin, sir?" Dalton stepped forward, his heart pounding. What was he doing? He had come here with barely enough money to buy 2 breeding cows and some chickens. 1 gold coin was most of his savings, meant to carry him through the winter. But the words were out and he could not take them back. 1 gold coin, he repeated firmly. "I will pay it now." The crowd erupted in whispers and laughter. Someone called him a fool. Someone else made a vulgar joke about his intentions. Dalton ignored them all, keeping his eyes on the auctioneer, who recovered quickly from his surprise. "Sold to the gentleman for 1 gold coin. Come forward and claim your purchase, sir." Dalton pushed through the crowd, fishing the coin from his belt pouch with shaking fingers. The auctioneer bid it to verify its authenticity, grinned, and handed Dalton the chain attached to the orc woman's collar. Up close, Dalton could see how badly she had been treated. Her feet were bleeding, her lips cracked from dehydration. But her eyes, when she finally lifted her head to look at him, blazed with barely contained fury and something else he could not quite name. "She is all yours," the auctioneer said cheerfully. "The shackles stay on until you reach your property. Keep them on if you are wise. These creatures are dangerous." Dalton nodded mutely and tugged gently on the chain. The orc woman stumbled after him, her movements stiff and pained. He led her through the crowd as quickly as he could, ignoring the stares and comments. His wagon waited at the edge of town, his old mare Bessie standing patiently in her traces. He helped the orc woman into the back of the wagon. She climbed in without assistance despite her chains, refusing his offered hand, and covered her with a blanket. Then he climbed onto the driver's seat and urged Bessie into motion, leaving Greyhill and its horrors behind. The journey to his farm took 3 hours. Dalton did not speak, and neither did his passenger. He could feel her eyes on his back the entire way, watching, assessing. He wondered if she planned to kill him the moment he removed her chains. She would certainly have reason to. His farm appeared as the sun began its descent toward the western hills. It was modest, a small wooden house, a barn, a chicken coop, and 30 acres of land, half of which he had managed to clear and plant. It was not much, but it was his, earned with blood and toil. He stopped the wagon near the house and climbed down, his muscles aching from the long day. The orc woman watched him with those fierce eyes as he lowered the wagon's back panel. "I am going to remove your chains now," he said quietly. "You are free to leave if you wish, or you can stay. There is food, water, and a safe place to sleep. The choice is yours." She stared at him as though he had spoken in a foreign tongue. Perhaps in a way he had. Kindness was probably a language she no longer understood. Dalton pulled the key he had purchased from the auctioneer from his pocket and unlocked the shackles around her ankles first, then her wrists, and finally the collar around her neck. The iron clanged as it fell into the wagon bed. The orc woman rubbed her wrists, her green skin raw and bleeding where the metal had chafed. "There is a well behind the house," Dalton continued, stepping back to give her space. "Help yourself. I will bring food out shortly." He turned and walked toward his house, half expecting a knife in his back. But nothing happened. When he glanced over his shoulder from the doorway, she was still standing by the wagon, watching him with an expression he could not read. Dalton went inside and leaned against the door, his heart racing. What had he done? He had just spent his winter savings on an orc slave and then freed her immediately. She could kill him in his sleep, steal everything he owned, or simply disappear. Any of those outcomes would serve him right for his impulsive stupidity. But he could not have left her there. He knew what would have happened to her in that farmer's hands. Some things were worse than death. He gathered bread, cheese, and dried meat from his meager stores, along with a jug of water and clean rags for bandages. When he stepped back outside, the orc woman had moved to the well. She had pulled up a bucket and was drinking directly from it in great, desperate gulps. Dalton approached slowly, setting the food and supplies on the ground several feet away. "I have brought food and bandages for your wounds. Please, eat as much as you need." She set down the bucket and turned to face him fully for the first time. In the golden light of late afternoon, she was striking despite her battered condition. Her features were strong and angular, her eyes a deep amber that seemed to glow in certain lights. She was young, probably close to his own 24 years, and carried herself with a dignity that chains and cruelty had failed to break. "Why?" she asked, and her voice was not what he expected. It was rich and clear, with only the barest hint of the guttural accent common to orcs. "Why did you pay so much for me?" Dalton blinked, surprised by the question and the eloquence with which she asked it. "I could not let them sell you to that farmer. I know his reputation. So you bought me instead. To what purpose?" Her hand moved to her belt, where a knife should have been if she had been allowed to keep one. If you expect me to warm your bed, human, I will kill you and welcome death afterward. No, Dalton said quickly, raising his hands. Nothing like that. I told you are free. I have no claim on you. Stay or go as you please. She studied him with narrowed eyes. Humans do not free slaves out of kindness. What is your price? What do you want from me? Nothing, Dalton insisted. I could not leave you there, that is all. You are a fool then. But some of the hostility left her posture. She moved toward the food, keeping him in her peripheral vision, and picked up the bread. She ate like someone who expected the food to be snatched away at any moment quickly, defensively. Dalton sat down on the grass, far enough away to be non-threatening. What is your name? She paused mid-bite, then swallowed. Skarga, daughter of Gramesh, of the Black Fang clan. She said it like a challenge, as though the name should mean something to him. It did. The Black Fang clan had been among the fiercest orc warriors during the war. Dalton's regiment had fought them in the Battle of Broken Ridge. Few on either side had survived that bloodbath. I am Dalton. Dalton Shepherd. I was a soldier once. Now I am just a farmer. Skarga's eyes flickered with recognition and something darker. Shepherd, I remember that name. Your people killed my father at Broken Ridge. Dalton's throat tightened. I am sorry. I lost both my brothers there too. It was a terrible battle. War is always terrible, Skarga said bitterly. She finished the bread and started on the cheese, eating more slowly now. It was also pointless. We fought over land neither side truly needed, pushed by leaders who valued pride over lives. Her words shocked him. He had never heard an orc speak of the war with anything other than bloodthirsty pride or burning hatred. You do not believe in your clan's cause. I believed in protecting my people, Skarga said, but the war did not protect us. It destroyed us. The Black Fang clan is broken now, scattered to the winds. Those who survived are hunted like animals and sold as slaves. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. So no, I do not believe it was worth it. They sat in silence for a long moment. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, and crickets began their evening song in the fields. You speak the common tongue very well, Dalton said finally. My mother was a human, Skarga admitted, so quietly he almost missed it. She taught me your language and your letters. My clan barely tolerated her, and they tolerated me even less. Half-breed, they called me, though I was born with orc strength and orc features. When my father died, his brother claimed leadership and cast me out. He said I was weak, tainted by human blood. The slavers found me 3 days later. Dalton felt something twist in his chest. How long ago was that? 8 months. She looked down at her scarred hands. I have been owned by 4 different masters. The last one beat me for speaking. He said orcs should not talk, only work. So I stopped working, and he sold me to the auction house in Greyhill. You are safe here, Dalton said firmly. No one will beat you or force you to do anything. You have my word. Skarga laughed, but it was a hollow sound. The word of a human. Forgive me if I do not find that reassuring. Then judge me by my actions, Dalton replied. Stay a few days. Rest. Heal. If you still want to leave after that, I will give you supplies for the journey and point you toward free orc territories in the north. She studied him for a long time, her amber eyes searching his face for deception. Finally, she nodded slowly. 3 days, then I leave. Agreed. Dalton stood and gestured toward the barn. There is a clean loft with fresh hay and blankets. You can sleep there, or I can make room in the house if you prefer. The barn is fine. I prefer distance between myself and humans while I sleep. Understandable. He picked up the bandages. Will you let me tend to your wounds first? Some of them look infected. Skarga hesitated, then held out her arms. Dalton cleaned and wrapped her wrists carefully, then her ankles, working in silence. Her skin was warm beneath his fingers, the texture different from human skin but not unpleasantly so. She watched him the entire time, tense and ready to fight. When he finished, she stood abruptly. "Thank you," she said, the words seeming to cost her something. Then she walked to the barn without looking back. Dalton watched her go, wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into. He had freed her out of impulse and conscience, expecting her to disappear into the night. But she had stayed, if only for 3 days. 3 days to prove he was different. 3 days to show her that not all humans were cruel. He had a feeling they would be the most important 3 days of his life. Sleep eluded Dalton that night. He lay in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound from outside. Part of him still expected Skarga to murder him or vanish with his horse and wagon. But when dawn broke and he finally dragged himself out of bed, he found her sitting on a fence rail near the barn, watching the sunrise with an expression of profound weariness. She turned as he approached. "You are alive. Surprising. Why would I not be?" Most humans who free slaves expect them to be grateful. When the gratitude does not come in the form they desire, they become violent. "I have killed 2 men for putting their hands on me in the night." Dalton stopped walking, a chill running through him. "I will never do that. You have my word." "Words," she repeated, but without the same bitterness as before. "We will see." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Dalton cleared his throat. "I need to feed the chickens and check my autumn wheat. You are welcome to explore the property or rest, whatever you prefer." "I will explore," Skarga said, sliding down from the fence. "I want to know the exits and hiding places in case I need them." It was a grim statement, but Dalton could not blame her. The woods to the north are dense and lead to the river. The south road goes to Greyhill. East and west are neighboring farms, though the nearest is 3 miles away. We are fairly isolated here. She nodded and walked off toward the tree line, moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite her injuries. Dalton watched her go, then turned to his morning chores. The chickens clucked indignantly as he scattered their feed, and Bessie whickered for her breakfast. The familiar routine soothed him, though his mind kept wandering to the orc woman exploring his land. What must she think of him? Did she believe his claims of freedom, or was she simply biding her time, planning her escape? He was checking the wheat when she reappeared an hour later. She moved silently, but he had learned in the war to sense when he was being watched. He turned to find her standing at the field's edge, studying his work. "The wheat looks healthy," she observed. "You rotate your crops?" "Yes. I planted beans in the eastern field last year to enrich the soil. This year wheat, next year I will plant oats." "Smart." She stepped into the field, running her fingers over the golden stalks. "My clan grew wheat before the war. I helped with the harvest every year from the time I could walk. You know farming, then?" "I know many things humans do not expect orcs to know. We are not the mindless savages your people believe us to be." There was an edge to her voice, but also a kind of tired resignation, as though she had given up trying to convince people of her worth. "I know," Dalton said quietly. "I fought alongside enough orcish prisoners conscripted into our army. They were as brave and intelligent as any human soldier, more so in some cases." Skarga looked at him sharply. "Your army conscripted orc prisoners, the weak ones who could not fight back. They were given a choice: serve or hang. Most served. They died just as pointlessly as the rest of us. Humans and orcs, dying together in a war neither side truly understood. Perhaps there is poetry in that." She laughed bitterly. "Or perhaps it is simply the ultimate expression of our shared stupidity." They worked in silence after that, Dalton checking his crops while Skarga followed at a distance, observing. When the sun climbed high enough to make the work uncomfortable, Dalton called a break and returned to the house. He emerged with bread, cold chicken from last night's dinner, and a jug of milk. "Lunch," he announced, spreading the food on a blanket under the large oak tree that shaded one side of his house. Skarga approached cautiously but sat down across from him. They ate without speaking at first, the silence broken only by birdsong and the rustle of leaves above. "Why do you live alone?" Skarga asked eventually. "No wife, no family. My family died in the war. My father and brothers fought. Only I came back. My mother died of grief the following winter." He picked at his bread. "As for a wife, most women in town find me too quiet, too haunted, I suppose. The war left marks that do not show on skin." Skarga nodded slowly. "I understand. I see my father's death every time I close my eyes. I hear my mother's screams when the clan cast her out years before the war, sending her back to human lands with nothing. I hear my own screams when the slavers caught me. What happened to your mother? I do not know. The clan forbade me from seeking her. I was 10 years old when she left. I have not seen her since." Pain flickered across her face. "I do not even know if she still lives. I am sorry." The words felt inadequate, but he meant them. Everyone is sorry. Sorry solves nothing. But her voice lacked real anger. She sounded simply tired. They finished eating, and Dalton gathered the remains. "I need to repair the barn roof this afternoon. There is a weak spot that will leak when the autumn rains come. You are welcome to rest, or—" "I will help," Skarga interrupted. Dalton blinked. "You do not have to. You are supposed to be resting. I will go mad if I sit still any longer. Show me what needs to be done." So they worked together through the afternoon, Skarga proving far more skilled at construction than Dalton had expected. She hauled timber without complaint, her orcish strength making the work easier despite her weakened state. She understood angles and weight distribution, offering suggestions that improved his original plan. "You are quite good at this," Dalton commented as they secured the final board. "My father was a builder as well as a warrior. He believed orcs should create as well as fight. He taught me his craft." She ran her hand along the smooth wood. "It has been a long time since I built anything. Slaves are not usually given tools." "Well, you are not a slave here." She looked at him, something shifting in her amber eyes. "No, I suppose I am not." That night, Dalton invited her to eat dinner inside the house. She accepted after a moment's hesitation. He prepared a simple stew with vegetables from his garden and salt pork, and they ate at his small wooden table. "This is good," Skarga said, surprise evident in her voice. "My mother taught me to cook." She said a man should be able to feed himself properly, not just survive on bread and dried meat. She was a wise woman. She was. Dalton smiled sadly. "I miss her." They talked more easily that evening, the initial hostility fading into something more comfortable. Skarga told him about orcish traditions, their festivals and songs. Dalton shared stories of his childhood, the pranks he and his brothers had played, the quiet life of a farming family before the war came. When darkness fell fully, Skarga stood. "I should sleep. Tomorrow is my last day here, according to our agreement. You can stay longer if you want," Dalton found himself saying. "There is plenty of work for two, and I would welcome the company." She studied him in the candlelight. "Why? Why would you want an orc living on your property?" "Your neighbors will talk. They may even turn hostile. Let them talk. This is my land, and I will share it with whomever I choose. You are a strange man, Dalton Shepherd. I have been told that before." She almost smiled the first time he had seen even the ghost of such an expression on her face. "I will think about it." He watched her walk back to the barn, hope stirring in his chest for reasons he did not fully understand. The next day, Skarga did not leave. She said nothing about staying or going. simply joined him for breakfast and started working alongside him in the fields. They fell into an easy rhythm, her strength and knowledge complementing his planning and patience. A week passed, then two. The summer heat gradually gave way to the cool relief of early autumn. The wheat ripened, golden and full, ready for harvest. Dalton taught Skarga how to use his scythe properly, and she taught him orcish work songs that made the long hours pass more quickly. They spoke of many things during those weeks: their fears, their losses, their fragile hopes for a peaceful future. Dalton learned that Skarga loved thunderstorms and hated the color yellow. She learned that Dalton had once wanted to be a scholar but could not afford the university fees. They discovered a shared love of terrible jokes and argued good-naturedly about whether oats or barley made better porridge. Slowly, carefully, trust began to build between them. Skarga started sleeping in the house's spare room instead of the barn. She stopped flinching when Dalton moved too quickly. He stopped second-guessing every word he said, afraid of offending or frightening her. One evening in late September, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The harvest was nearly complete, the granary full, and the promise of a successful season hung sweet in the air. "I have been thinking," Skarga said quietly. "About what?" "About kingdoms." Dalton turned to look at her, confused. "Kingdoms. When you bid 1 coin for me in that square, you had no idea what you were buying. For all you knew, I was exactly what the auctioneer claimed: a broken, worthless slave who would cause you nothing but trouble. I did not think of you as worthless. No, you did not. That is my point." She met his eyes, her expression serious. "Most humans see orcs as nothing animals, monsters, obstacles to be cleared. But you looked at me and saw a person worth saving, even at great cost to yourself. That single coin represented your entire winter savings, yet you spent it without hesitation. It was the right thing to do, perhaps. But here is what I have realized over these past weeks. You may have paid 1 coin for me, but I am worth far more than that. I am worth kingdoms, Dalton. Not because of anything special about me specifically, but because every person, human, orc or otherwise, carries that same inherent worth. I had forgotten that. 8 months of slavery had convinced me I was nothing, but you reminded me of my value. You gave me back my sense of self." Dalton swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "You were always worth everything, Skarga. I just helped you remember." She reached out slowly and took his hand. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him beyond the necessities of working together. Her skin was warm, her grip strong. "Thank you," she said simply. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Something had shifted between them, something profound and terrifying and wonderful all at once. October arrived with crisp mornings and the brilliant colors of changing leaves. Dalton and Skarga finished the harvest and began preparing the farm for winter. They repaired the chicken coop, sealed gaps in the house's walls, and cut wood for the cold months ahead. Dalton's nearest neighbor, a gruff older man named Thomas, rode over one afternoon while they were stacking firewood. He dismounted slowly, eyeing Skarga with open suspicion. "Shepherd," he said curtly, "heard you have an orc living here." "I do," Dalton replied calmly, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Her name is Skarga." "It has a name, does it?" Thomas spat into the dirt. "Bad business keeping one of them around. They cannot be trusted." Skarga's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, continuing to stack wood with deliberate precision. "Skarga is my friend and my partner in working this farm," Dalton said firmly. "She has earned my trust and my respect. I will thank you to speak of her with courtesy or not at all." Thomas's face reddened. "You have gone soft in the head, boy. That thing is dangerous. When it cuts your throat in your sleep, Do not say I did not warn you. If that is all you came to say, you can leave." Thomas glared at both of them, then remounted his horse. "You will regret this. Mark my words." He rode off without a backward glance. Skarga set down the wood she was holding. "He will spread talk. Others will come, and they will not all be satisfied with warnings." "Let them come," Dalton said, anger heating his voice. "This is my land. I fought and bled for it. I will not let small-minded bigots dictate how I live. You are risking a great deal for me. You are worth the risk." She looked at him, and something in her expression made his heart race. "Am I?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You are worth everything." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Skarga smiled, a real smile this time, showing her small tusks, and Dalton thought it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Then I suppose I should start earning my keep more formally," she said. "If I am to be your partner, we should make it official." "Official how?" "I do not know. Humans have customs for these things, do they not? Contracts, agreements." Dalton laughed, giddy and nervous. "Are you asking to become a business partner?" "I am asking to become whatever you will allow me to be." She stepped closer, her amber eyes searching his face. "I am asking if you might feel even a fraction of what I have come to feel for you." His breath caught. "And what do you feel?" "Safe," she whispered. "Valued, seen, cared for. I feel like I have found a home after wandering lost for years. I feel like I could spend the rest of my life working beside you and consider it time well spent." She paused. "I feel like I might be falling in love with you, though I know that is foolish and impossible." And he kissed her, cutting off her words. It was impulsive and clumsy and perfect. She went rigid with surprise, then melted into him, her strong arms coming around his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "Not foolish, not impossible. I love you, Skarga. I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you demanded to know why I freed you." She laughed, the sound joyous and unguarded. "Then we are both fools together. The best kind of fools." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. They stood in the autumn sunlight, holding each other, and Dalton felt the broken pieces of his heart beginning to heal. The war had taken so much from both of them, but perhaps it had also led them to this moment to each other. "So," Skarga said eventually, still wrapped in his arms, "what do we do now?" "Now, we finish stacking this wood before dark. Tomorrow we figure out the rest." She grinned. "Ever the practical farmer. Someone has to be." He kissed her forehead. "But for the record, I would very much like you to stay, not as a worker or a business partner. As my partner in everything, if you will have me." "I will have you," she said softly, "for as long as you will have me." "Then I suppose that settles it." They returned to their work, but everything felt different now, brighter, lighter, full of possibility. Dalton caught himself smiling for no reason, and when he glanced at Skarga, she was smiling too. The trouble Thomas had predicted arrived a week later in the form of 6 men on horseback, all armed. They rode up to the house just after dawn, their faces hard with righteous anger. Dalton stepped out onto the porch, Skarga beside him. He had known this confrontation was coming. Small towns did not tolerate deviations from their narrow norms, and his relationship with Skarga was a deviation of the highest order. "Dalton Shepherd," the leader called out. He was a heavy-set man named Marcus Dunn, who owned a large farm to the south. "We have come to discuss your orc problem." "I have no orc problem," Dalton replied calmly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I have an orc friend, which is no problem at all." "That creature is not your friend," another man shouted. "It is a savage, an enemy. You dishonor the memory of every man who died fighting its kind." "Do not presume to tell me about dishonor," Dalton said coldly. "I fought at Broken Ridge. I watched my brothers die. I earned my opinions through blood and pain. What battles have you fought? Marcus dismounted, his hand resting on his sword hilt. We are not here to debate the war. We are here to protect our community. That orc must leave, or we will remove it by force. Skarga stepped forward before Dalton could respond. I have a name. It is Skarga, and I will not leave unless Dalton asks me to, which he will not. You have no say in this, beast, Marcus snarled. She has every say, Dalton countered, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Skarga. This is our land. You are trespassing. Leave now, or I will defend my property. There are 6 of us and 1 of you, Marcus pointed out. There are 6 of you and 2 of us, Skarga corrected. I am worth at least 3 of you in a fight, and Dalton is worth 2 more. The real question is which 3 of you want to die today, and which 3 want to flee with their tails between their legs. One of the younger men actually laughed nervously. Marcus's face went purple with rage. You think this is a joke? We could burn your house to the ground. We could drive you both out with nothing. You could try, Dalton said quietly. But I did not survive the war by backing down from bullies. If you want a fight, I will give you one. But I warn you, I am not the frightened farmer you seem to think I am. And Skarga is not a helpless slave anymore. We will defend ourselves and our home with everything we have. The men shifted uncomfortably. They had come expecting an easy intimidation, not a genuine threat of violence. Marcus looked around at his companions, seeing their resolve waver. This is not over, he said finally, mounting his horse again. The law will hear of this. You cannot harbor an orc without proper documentation and oversight. Skarga is free. She has committed no crime. She has as much right to be here as anyone. The law does not see it that way. Then the law is wrong, and I will fight it. Dalton's voice rang with conviction. I am tired of this cycle of hatred. The war ended 3 years ago. It is time we started building peace instead of perpetuating cruelty. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then wheeled his horse around. You are a fool, Shepherd, a fool and a traitor to your own kind. If loving Skarga makes me a traitor, then I will wear that title proudly. The words hung in the air. Several of the men gasped at his open declaration. Marcus's expression twisted with disgust. You admit it, then. You lay with that creature. I love her, Dalton corrected. And I intend to marry her if she will have me, laws and customs be damned. Skarga turned to stare at him, shock plain on her face. He had not planned to propose like this in anger and defiance, but the words felt right nonetheless. You have condemned yourself, Marcus said. When the magistrate hears of this perversion, let him hear. Let everyone hear. I love Skarga, daughter of Gramash of the Blackfang clan. I love her strength and her intelligence and her courage. I love the way she sings while working and the way she sees the world. I would rather stand with her against the entire kingdom than bow to prejudice and hatred. The men rode away muttering curses and threats. When they had gone, Dalton turned to Skarga, suddenly uncertain. I am sorry, he said. I did not mean to pressure you. That was not the romantic proposal you deserve. I could not stand there and let them talk about you like that without claiming my feelings openly. Skarga was crying. He had never seen her cry before. Tears tracked down her green cheeks, glistening in the morning light. Skarga, did I hurt you? I am so sorry. She grabbed him and kissed him hard enough to steal his breath. When she pulled back, she was laughing through her tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you, you ridiculous, brave, beautiful fool. I will marry you and stand beside you against whatever comes. I will be your wife and your partner and your love for as long as we both shall live. Relief and joy crashed over him. You will, truly, truly. Though I think we both know it will not be easy. There is no priest who will marry us, no law that will recognize our union. Then we will marry ourselves, Dalton said firmly. We will make our own vows before whatever gods or powers watch over us. We need no one's permission to love each other. When? Today. Now, why wait? She laughed again, radiant despite her tears. Now, just like that, why not? Unless you want a grand ceremony with witnesses and— No, she interrupted. No, I want exactly this. I want to marry you in the place we have built together, with no one but the sky and the trees to witness. I want it to be ours alone. So they stood there on the porch of their home, hands clasped, and spoke their vows to each other. There were no priests or magistrates, no legal documents or official seals. There was only Dalton and Skarga, two wounded souls who had found healing in each other's presence. Dalton went first. I, Dalton Shepherd, take you, Skarga of the Black Fang clan, to be my wife. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to honor your strength, to value your wisdom, and to love you with everything I am. I promise to defend you against those who would harm you and to build a life with you that is worthy of both our struggles. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, my heart. Skarga's voice shook as she replied. I, Skarga, daughter of Gramash, take you, Dalton Shepherd, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to honor your kindness, to value your courage, and to love you with everything I am. I promise to be your partner in work and in rest, in joy and in hardship. You gave me back my freedom and my sense of worth. In return, I give you my loyalty, my trust, and my love for all the days of my life. They kissed to seal their vows, and in that moment, Dalton felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. The war had left him broken and hollow. Skarga had made him whole again. They celebrated their impromptu wedding with a simple meal and spent the afternoon working side by side in comfortable silence, both wearing foolish smiles. That evening, Skarga moved her few possessions from the spare room into Dalton's bedroom, and they fell asleep in each other's arms, finally and fully united. The trouble with the law arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a magistrate and 4 armed guards. Dalton and Skarga were working in the vegetable garden when the official party rode up. Dalton Shepherd, the magistrate called out. He was a thin, officious man with a pinched face and cold eyes. I am he. I am Magistrate Thornton. I have received reports that you are unlawfully harboring an orcish slave without proper documentation. You are also accused of cohabiting with said slave in violation of public decency laws. Skarga is not a slave, Dalton said evenly. She is free and has committed no crime. And she is my wife, not a criminal. Thornton's eyebrows rose. Your wife? There is no record of any such marriage. We married ourselves by our own vows. We need no legal sanction to love each other. I am afraid the law disagrees. Marriage between humans and orcs is prohibited under the Species Protection Act of 1147. Such unions are considered void and unenforceable. Then your laws are unjust, perhaps, but they are still laws, and I am sworn to uphold them. Thornton pulled a rolled document from his saddlebag. I have here a warrant for the seizure of the orc known as Skarga. She is to be returned to the auction house in Greyhill for proper processing and sale. Rage flashed through Dalton, hot and fierce. You will not touch her. Mr. Shepherd, I urge you not to interfere with legal proceedings. That would be a crime, and I would be forced to arrest you as well. Skarga put her hand on Dalton's arm. Let me speak, she said quietly. Then louder, addressing the magistrate. I am Skarga, daughter of Gramash. I was enslaved illegally after the war ended. The Treaty of Riversend clearly states that all prisoners taken during the war were to be released or granted fair trial. I received neither. I was sold as property despite the treaty's terms. Therefore, My enslavement was invalid from the start, and I owe no person or institution any obligation. Thornton frowned. The treaty applies only to prisoners taken during active conflict. You were captured after the war's official end. By 3 days, Skarga countered. 3 days after a treaty my people were not informed of. How can we be held accountable for violating peace terms we did not know existed? Ignorance is not a defense. It is when the information was deliberately withheld. Human forces continued raiding Orcish settlements for weeks after the treaty was signed, capturing those who had already laid down their arms. That is not enforcement of law. That is exploitation and cruelty dressed in legal language. The magistrate's expression suggested he had not expected to be challenged so eloquently. He recovered quickly, though his confidence seemed shaken. Your arguments may have merit, but I am not the person to adjudicate them. You would need to appeal to the provincial court in the capital. Then I will appeal, Skarga said firmly. And until that appeal is heard, I assert my right to remain free. I have committed no crime. I live peacefully on private land with my husband. We harm no one and ask only to be left alone. Thornton looked uncertain. His guards shifted uneasily, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. One of them, a younger man with a scar across his cheek, spoke up. Sir, if I may, the lady makes a fair point. My brother fought in the war. He told me about the raids that continued after the treaty. It did not sit right with him. If her capture was part of that, maybe she does have grounds for appeal. Your opinion was not requested, Corporal, Thornton snapped. But doubt had entered his voice. Dalton seized the opening. All we ask is fairness, magistrate. Let Skarga file her appeal properly. If the court rules against her, we will accept the judgment. But do not drag her back into slavery without due process. That is the very injustice the treaty was meant to prevent. Thornton pursed his lips, clearly torn between his duty and his conscience. Finally, he rolled up his warrant. Very well. I will allow a stay of enforcement pending appeal. You have 60 days to file your case with the provincial court. If you fail to do so, or if the court rules against you, this warrant will be executed immediately. Do you understand? We understand, Skarga said. Thank you, magistrate. Your fairness will not be forgotten. Thornton nodded curtly and rode away with his guards. Dalton and Skarga watched them go, then turned to each other. 60 days, Dalton said. That is not much time. It is enough. Skarga's jaw was set with determination. We will go to the capital, we will fight this properly, and we will win. The capital is 2 weeks' journey, and we would need money for lawyers, lodging, documentation fees. Then we will sell the harvest. We will do whatever is necessary. She took his hands. I will not go back to slavery, Dalton. I would rather die. But I do not want to live as a fugitive either, always looking over my shoulder. I want to be free legitimately, recognized by the law that once denied my humanity. Then we will make it happen, Dalton promised. Together, they spent the next 3 days preparing for the journey. Dalton sold most of their autumn wheat to a merchant from a neighboring town, earning enough silver to finance their trip. They packed supplies, arranged for Thomas, despite his prejudices, to watch the property for a fee, and gathered every document they could find related to Skarga's capture and sale. On a cool morning in early November, they set out for the capital city of Everhold, riding in their wagon with Bessie pulling faithfully. The journey was long and often uncomfortable. They faced hostility at several inns and taverns, refused service, or charged extortionate rates once proprietors realized Skarga was an orc. Twice, they were forced to sleep in the wagon rather than endure harassment, but there were moments of kindness too. An elderly woman in a small village offered them bread and soup, saying she had lost her son to the war and believed peace meant embracing former enemies. A human soldier traveling the same road shared his campfire and told them he respected their courage. These small gestures of humanity sustained them through the difficult journey. They reached Everhold on the 12th day, and Dalton stared in wonder at the massive stone walls and towering buildings. He had never seen a city before. His entire life had been spent in rural areas. Skarga, too, seemed overwhelmed by the crowds and noise. They found lodging at a modest inn on the city's outskirts and immediately began seeking legal assistance. The first 6 lawyers they approached refused to take their case, some rudely, others with apologetic resignation. On the 3rd day of searching, they found a young attorney named Helena Barnes who listened to their story with genuine interest. "You are right," Helena said, reviewing the documents Skarga had provided. "Your capture violated the treaty terms. The raids that took place in those first weeks after the signing were illegal, though the government has been reluctant to acknowledge it. Several cases like yours have been quietly settled out of court." "Settled how?" Dalton asked. "The government paid the former slave owners compensation and released the enslaved orcs, but it was done discreetly to avoid public outcry." "So there is precedent," Skarga said. "That strengthens our case." "It does, but I must warn you, arguing this before the provincial court will not be easy. Public opinion is still very much against orc rights. The judges may be sympathetic in private but reluctant to rule in your favor openly." "What do we need to do?" Dalton asked. Helena smiled. "Fight, prepare testimony, gather evidence. Most importantly, be yourselves. Let the court see that you are not monsters or criminals, but people trying to build a peaceful life together. That may be our strongest weapon." Over the following weeks, Helena worked tirelessly on their case. She interviewed Skarga extensively, documenting every detail of her capture and subsequent enslavement. She tracked down the soldier who had led the raid that took Skarga, securing a sworn statement that the raid occurred after the treaty signing. She compiled testimonies from other orcs who had been similarly captured, building a pattern of illegal activity. Dalton and Skarga spent their days exploring the city and their nights preparing for the trial. Dalton was surprised to discover a small but growing community of humans and orcs living peacefully together in Everhold's merchant quarter. These families had formed despite legal and social barriers, creating their own support networks. Meeting them gave Dalton and Skarga hope that they were not as alone as they had believed. The trial began on a cold morning in early December. The courtroom was packed with spectators, some supportive, many hostile. 3 judges sat at the high bench, their expressions stern and unreadable. The government's attorney, a severe man named Richard Crane, argued that Skarga's capture had been legitimate, that her claims of illegal detention were fabrications designed to escape lawful ownership. Helena countered with devastating precision, presenting document after document proving the timeline of Skarga's capture. She called witnesses who testified to the systematic raids that continued after the war's end. She even called the magistrate, Thornton, who admitted under oath that such cases troubled him. Then came Skarga's testimony. She stood before the court with quiet dignity, her green skin and tusks marking her as other, yet her bearing commanding respect. "I do not ask for sympathy," she told the judges. "I ask only for justice. I was taken from my homeland 3 days after a peace treaty was signed. I was given no trial, no hearing, no chance to speak in my own defense. I was treated as an animal, beaten and sold repeatedly, denied my humanity at every turn. The law may have allowed this, but that does not make it right. Laws can be unjust. Laws can be cruel. And when they are, it is the duty of those with power to change them." She paused, her amber eyes sweeping the courtroom. "I do not hate humans. My mother was human. The man I love is human. I know that your people are capable of great kindness as well as great cruelty. But I also know that true peace can never be built on a foundation of slavery and oppression. If you wish to honor the treaty your leaders signed, if you wish to truly end the war that cost so many lives on both sides, then you must recognize that orcs are people too. We feel pain and joy, fear and love. We deserve the same rights and protections as any human. That is all I ask. That is all any of us ask." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even some of the hostile spectators looked thoughtful. Crane tried to discredit her testimony, but his questions only made her more sympathetic. Finally, Dalton testified. He spoke of his own experiences in the war, the horrors he had witnessed, the pointlessness of so much death. He spoke of finding Skarga in that auction square and seeing not an enemy but a person in desperate need of help. "I fought for this kingdom," he said. "I bled for it. I lost my family for it, and I have earned the right to live my life as I see fit. Skarga is my wife in every way that matters. She is my partner, my companion, my love. We have built a home together, a peaceful home that harms no one. We ask only to be allowed to live in that peace. If the law cannot accommodate that, then the law is broken and should be fixed." The judges retired to deliberate, and the wait was agonizing. 3 hours passed, then 4. Dalton held Skarga's hand, both of them trembling with nervous anticipation. Finally, the judges returned. The chief judge, an older woman with silver hair, read their decision. "The court has reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in the matter of Skarga of the Blackfang clan. We find that her capture did indeed occur in violation of the Treaty of Riversend, which explicitly forbade further hostilities after its signing. The raids that continued for several weeks after the treaty represent a shameful chapter in our history, one that this court cannot in good conscience ignore." Dalton's heart leaped. "Therefore, we rule that Skarga's enslavement was unlawful from its inception. She is hereby declared free of all legal encumbrances. No person or entity has claim upon her. Furthermore, we find that the Species Protection Act of 1147, which prohibits marriage between humans and orcs, is inconsistent with the spirit of the Treaty of Riversend, which committed both sides to pursuing peaceful coexistence. We cannot on one hand claim to seek peace, and on the other hand, criminalize the most fundamental expressions of that peace, family, and love." Gasps erupted throughout the courtroom. The chief judge raised her hand for silence. "Therefore, this court strikes down the Species Protection Act as it applies to consensual unions between adult humans and orcs. Dalton Shepherd and Skarga of the Blackfang clan are recognized as lawfully married, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. This court's ruling is final." The gavel came down, and Dalton felt tears streaming down his face. Skarga was crying too, clutching him tightly. Helena was grinning, triumphant. Behind them, some spectators cheered while others shouted angry protests. Dalton did not care. They had won. Skarga was truly free, and their marriage was recognized. They left the courthouse in a daze, surrounded by well-wishers from the human orc community who had attended the trial. That night, they celebrated with Helena and their new friends, toasting their victory with wine and laughter. But even in their joy, Dalton knew challenges remained. The court's ruling would be controversial. There would be resistance, backlash, perhaps even violence from those who opposed the decision. Their journey was not over. Still, as he held Skarga in his arms that night, he felt nothing but hope. They had fought for their right to love each other and won. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They stayed in Everhold for another week, handling the legal paperwork that formalized Skarga's freedom and their marriage. Helena helped them secure official documents, including identity papers for Skarga that recognized her as a free Orc citizen with full legal rights. "You have made history," Helena told them on their last evening in the city. "This ruling will change things for every human Orc couple in the kingdom. You have given them hope and a legal foundation to build upon." "We only wanted to live in peace," Skarga said. "Sometimes living in peace requires fighting for it first," Helena replied with a smile. "You both fought bravely. I am honored to have represented you." They returned home in mid-December to find their farm intact, though Thomas reported several incidents of vandalism and threatening messages left on the property. Dalton was not surprised. Change never came easily, especially in small communities, but there were positive changes too. Several neighbors quietly, cautiously expressed support for the court's decision. A few even brought gifts of food and supplies, acknowledging that Dalton and Skarga's love was their own business. Winter settled over the farm, and Dalton and Skarga spent the cold months working indoors, planning for the spring planting. They talked about expanding the farm, perhaps building a second barn. They talked about the future, about children someday, about the kind of life they wanted to build. On a snowy evening in January, Skarga brought up a question that had been troubling her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Bidding that one coin for me. Your life would be simpler if you had walked away." Dalton set down the harness he was mending and pulled her close. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Skarga. You gave my life meaning again when I thought I had lost everything. If I had walked away that day, I would have missed out on the greatest joy I have ever known." "You paid one coin for me," she said softly. "But you gave me something priceless in return: my freedom, my dignity, my hope. I love you, Dalton Shepherd." "And I love you, Skarga Shepherd." He kissed her gently. "We are worth kingdoms, you and I. Together we can face anything." As winter gave way to spring, news of their court victory spread across the kingdom. Other human Orc couples began coming forward, seeking legal recognition of their relationships. Some traveled to visit Dalton and Skarga, looking for advice and solidarity. The farm became an unexpected gathering place, a symbol of the possibility of peace and love transcending old hatreds. Not everyone was pleased. There were protests, angry editorials in newspapers, even calls for legislative action to overturn the court's decision. But there was also growing support, particularly among younger people who had no direct memory of the war and were ready to move beyond its divisions. In March, Dalton and Skarga received an unexpected visitor, a young Orc woman named Thraka who had escaped from slavery, and heard of their case. She arrived on their doorstep exhausted and frightened, begging for help. "I heard you won your freedom in court," Thraka said. "I want to try the same, but I have no money for a lawyer, nowhere to stay." "You can stay here," Skarga said immediately. "We will help you," and they did. With Helena's assistance, they secured Thraka's freedom through the legal precedent their case had established. Word spread, and more escaped or freed Orcs sought refuge at the farm. Dalton and Skarga found themselves running a kind of informal sanctuary, helping others navigate the complex path to recognized freedom. It was exhausting work, but it felt right. They had been given a gift, the chance to build a new life together, and now they were helping others receive that same gift. By summer, their household had grown. 4 Orc women and 2 Orc men lived on the property, helping work the expanded farm in exchange for shelter and legal assistance. The community they built was unlike anything Dalton had imagined, a small experiment in peaceful coexistence. On a warm evening in June, Dalton and Skarga stood on their porch watching the sunset, their arms around each other. The fields stretched before them, golden with growing wheat. Laughter drifted from the barn where their extended household was preparing dinner. "We have built something remarkable," Skarga said, "a place where former enemies can become family." "We have," Dalton agreed. "Though I could never have imagined it that day in Greyhill when I bid 1 coin for a slave nobody wanted," Skarga smiled. "And when I spoke, you knew." "Knew what?" "That I was worth kingdoms." She turned to face him fully. "You saw past my chains, my scars, my orcish features. You saw me, my mind, my heart, my soul. You recognized my worth when the entire world had declared me worthless." "You were always worth everything," Dalton said. "I just had the good fortune to realize it." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Around them, their unlikely family gathered, former slaves and a war veteran, humans and orcs, all learning to live together in peace. In late July, Skarga revealed she was pregnant. The news filled Dalton with joy and terror in equal measure. A child half human, half orc would face unique challenges in a world still divided by prejudice. But it would also be a living symbol of hope, proof that love could indeed bridge any divide. They began preparing a nursery, enlisting help from their extended household. Thraka, who had become Skarga's close friend, wove a beautiful blanket using traditional orcish patterns. Marcus, one of the orc men living with them, carved a cradle from oak wood. As summer turned to autumn, and the second harvest season approached, Dalton reflected on how much had changed in a single year. He had gone from a lonely veteran trying to forget the war to a husband, a community leader, and soon to be father. His life was complicated now, full of challenges and occasional dangers, but it was also rich with love, purpose, and meaning. The harvest was bountiful, and they celebrated with a great feast, inviting their few supportive neighbors to join. It was a warm evening, full of music and laughter, humans and orcs sharing food and stories. Dalton looked around the table at the diverse faces and felt profound gratitude. This was what peace looked like, not the absence of conflict, but the active choice to build bridges, to recognize shared humanity, to love despite differences. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Dalton and Skarga walked hand in hand through their fields. The stars blazed overhead and crickets sang in the darkness. "You think our child will have a good life?" Skarga asked quietly, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I think our child will have a fighting chance at a good life," Dalton replied honestly. "The world is not perfect and prejudice will not disappear overnight, but things are better than they were a year ago and they will be better still in another year. We are changing things, Skarga, slowly but truly." "I hope you are right. I am right." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Our child will grow up on this farm, surrounded by love and acceptance. They will learn both human and orcish traditions. They will know that their parents fought for the right to exist, to love, to build a family. And they will carry that legacy forward, making the world better still for the next generation." Skarga smiled through sudden tears. "You always know what to say. I just tell the truth as I see it." He kissed her forehead. "And the truth is that we are building something that will outlast us both. A new way of living, a new kind of family, a new hope for peace." They stood together in the starlight, two people from enemy peoples who had found in each other something more precious than kingdom's love, partnership, and the courage to imagine a better future. Winter came again, and with it new challenges. Several neighboring farms banded together to pressure the regional governor to intervene, claiming that Dalton's household of orcs posed a security threat. The governor sent inspectors, but they found only a well-run farm and peaceful residents. The complaints were dismissed. In February, during a particularly brutal snowstorm, Skarga went into labor. Dalton paced frantically while Thraka and two other women who had birthing experience attended to Skarga. The labor was long and difficult, and Dalton feared he would lose her. But as dawn broke, a baby's cry rang through the house. Dalton rushed into the room to find Skarga exhausted but smiling, cradling a tiny infant to her chest. The baby had green-tinged skin, softer than a full orc's but clearly not human. Tiny pointed ears peeked through wisps of dark hair, and when the baby yawned, Dalton glimpsed the beginnings of small tusks in the gums. "A son," Skarga said softly. "We have a son." Dalton knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face. He touched the baby's tiny hand, marveling at the perfect miniature fingers that wrapped around his own. "He is beautiful, perfect." "What should we name him?" Skarga asked. They had discussed names for months but had not settled on one. Now, looking at their son's face, Dalton knew. "Garrett," he said. "Garrett Shepherd. A strong name for a strong boy who will bridge two worlds." "Garrett," Skarga repeated, testing it. "Yes, Garrett Shepherd, our son." The baby Garrett grew quickly, displaying a mix of human and orcish traits. He was strong and healthy, with an appetite that kept Skarga constantly nursing. The entire household doted on him, and even some of the more open-minded neighbors came to visit and offer congratulations. As spring arrived and Garrett approached 3 months old, Dalton received an official letter from the capital. His hands shook as he opened it, fearing new legal trouble. But the letter contained an invitation, not a summons. The Crown Council wished to meet with Dalton and Skarga to discuss their successful integration model and potentially extend legal protections to other human orc families across the kingdom. Their farm had become a case study, a proof of concept that peace was possible. They traveled to Everhold in April, bringing Garrett with them. The meeting with the council was formal and somewhat intimidating, but Dalton and Skarga spoke passionately about their experiences and the community they had built. They argued for expanded legal rights for orcs, for anti-discrimination protections, for investment in integration programs. The council listened with genuine interest. While they made no immediate commitments, several council members expressed support for gradual policy changes. It was not everything Dalton and Skarga hoped for, but it was progress. They returned home energized, ready to continue their work. The farm prospered, their household grew closer, and little Garrett thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. In June, a delegation of orcs from the Free Territories in the north visited the farm. They had heard of Dalton and Skarga's story and wanted to see for themselves if peaceful coexistence was truly possible. The visit was tense at first. Many of the northern orcs viewed any orc living among humans as a traitor. But as they spent time on the farm, seeing how the mixed household operated, their attitudes began to shift. They met Garrett and saw in him the literal embodiment of two peoples joined. They shared meals with humans who treated them as equals. They heard Skarga's story and recognized in it echoes of their own struggles. When the delegation left a week later, their leader, a formidable female warrior named Graka, clasped Skarga's arm in the traditional orcish gesture of respect. "You have not forgotten your heritage," Graka said. "You have expanded it. You have shown that being orc does not mean hating humans, and loving a human does not mean betraying your people. That is wisdom we would do well to learn." The visit marked a turning point. Relations between the northern orc territories and the human kingdom began to warm slightly, with Dalton and Skarga's farm serving as an informal meeting ground for cautious diplomacy. By the time Garrett celebrated his first birthday, The world was recognizably different from the one Dalton had known just 2 years earlier. Human-orc marriages were no longer illegal, though they remained controversial. Several mixed communities had formed in frontier areas, modeling themselves on Dalton and Skarga's household. Laws protecting orc rights were slowly being implemented, though enforcement was uneven. It was not utopia. Prejudice remained strong in many areas. Violence against orcs still occurred. The path toward true equality would be long and difficult, but change was happening. Seeds planted through love and courage were beginning to grow. On a golden afternoon in September, Dalton sat on his porch watching Garrett take his first wobbly steps, encouraged by Skarga's gentle coaxing. Their son stumbled and fell, then pulled himself up and tried again, his face scrunched with determination. "He has your stubbornness," Dalton called to Skarga. "And your foolish optimism," she called back, laughing. Thraka emerged from the house with a tray of cold drinks settling beside Dalton. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I first came here I thought you were crazy. A human who freed an orc and fell in love with her. It seemed impossible. But now, watching all this..." She gestured at the farm, the household, the playing child. "Now I understand. You did not just free Skarga. You freed all of us in a way. You showed us that another kind of life is possible." "Skarga freed herself," Dalton corrected. "And you freed yourself. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No," Thraka said firmly. "You chose to see worth where others saw only property. That was not luck or timing. That was character. That was love." Garrett succeeded in walking several steps before tumbling into Skarga's arms. Her delighted laughter rang across the yard, and Dalton felt his heart swell with emotion. This was his family. This unlikely, beautiful, hard-won family. He thought back to that day in Greyhill's dusty square, when he had made an impulsive decision to bid 1 coin for an orc slave nobody wanted. It had seemed foolish then, possibly ruinous. He had acted on instinct and conscience, with no plan and no guarantee of any positive outcome. But when Skarga had spoken, demanding to know why he had freed her, he had known. Not consciously, perhaps, but in the deep places of the heart where truth resides. He had known she was worth everything, worth his savings, worth social ostracism, worth fighting for, worth loving. She had been worth kingdoms then, and she remained so now. Not because of any mystical quality or extraordinary ability, but because every person carried that inherent worth. Skarga's tragedy had been that the world had denied her value. Dalton's gift had been recognizing and honoring it. Together, they had built something that honored them both, a life of mutual respect, shared labor, and deep love. They had created a family and a community. They had changed laws and shifted attitudes. They had proven that peace was possible when people chose love over hate. As evening fell and the household gathered for dinner, Dalton looked around the table at the diverse faces, human and orc, young and old, scarred by war and hopeful for the future. This was his kingdom, he realized. Not land or wealth or power, but this. People coming together in peace, choosing family over fear, building something new from the ruins of old hatreds. Skarga caught his eye across the table and smiled, understanding without words what he was feeling. She raised her cup in a silent toast, and he raised his in return, to love, he thought, to courage, to the worth that resides in every person, waiting to be recognized and honored, to second chances and new beginnings, to his wife, his son, his unexpected family, to all of it. After dinner, when Garrett had been put to bed and the household had retired for the night, Dalton and Skarga stood together in the doorway of their home, watching the stars emerge. "Tell me," Skarga said softly, "if you could go back to that day in Greyhill, knowing everything that would happen, the struggles, the legal battles, the prejudice we have faced, would you still bid that one coin? Dalton did not hesitate. In a heartbeat. Every moment of difficulty has been worth it for us, for Garrett, for the life we have built. I would pay 1,000 coins, 1,000,000. Every coin in every kingdom if I had them. Foolish man, she murmured, but her voice was thick with emotion. Foolish, perhaps, but happy. So very, very happy. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who had found in each other the rarest of gifts, not just love, but partnership, equality, mutual respect. They had taken their pain and trauma and transformed it into something beautiful. The world is changing, Skarga said eventually. Slowly but truly. Our son will grow up in a world different from the one we knew. Better, Dalton agreed. Not perfect, but better, and his children will see an even better world. That is how progress works, one generation at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love and courage at a time. Skarga leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you, Dalton Shepherd. Thank you for seeing my worth when no one else would. Thank you for teaching me what real courage looks like, he replied. Thank you for choosing to stay, to fight, to build this life with me. Thank you for our son and our family and every beautiful moment we have shared. They went inside together, closing the door on the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But they would face those challenges together, as they had faced everything else. In the nursery, Garrett slept peacefully in his hand-carved cradle, dreaming infant dreams. He was the future, the hope, the living proof that love could triumph over hatred. His parents had paid a steep price for his existence, fighting legal battles and social prejudice, enduring threats and harassment. But as Dalton stood watching his son sleep, Skarga at his side, he knew it had been worth every struggle. This child, this perfect blend of two peoples once at war, represented everything they had fought for. Garrett would never know slavery or the auction block. He would grow up free, loved, valued, his worth recognized from his first breath. That was the kingdom Dalton had won with his one coin. Not land or wealth or power, but this. A family, a future, a world slowly learning to choose love over hate. It was more than enough. It was everything. And so Dalton Shepherd and Skarga of the Blackfang clan lived their lives in peace and purpose, raising their son and helping others find freedom. They grew old together on their farm, surrounded by the family they had built and the community they had helped create. They saw laws change and attitudes shift. They watched as human-orc marriages became more common, as mixed communities flourished, as the younger generation grew up seeing former enemies as potential friends, partners, lovers. The scars of war never fully healed, for either of them. But love proved to be a powerful medicine, and together they transformed pain into purpose, hatred into hope. They had proven that one person's choice to recognize another's worth could change the world. That a single act of courage could ripple outward, touching countless lives. That love, true love that saw past surface differences to the precious humanity beneath, was the most powerful force in existence. Dalton had bid one coin for an orc woman nobody wanted. When she spoke, he knew she was worth kingdoms. And in building a life together, they proved that truth to a world that desperately needed to learn it. Their story became legend, told and retold across the kingdom and beyond. It inspired others to bridge divides, to see worth in unexpected places, to choose love when hate seemed easier. It was not a fairy tale with instant transformation. Real change was slow and difficult and imperfect. But it was real change nonetheless. And it began with one simple, profound act. A lonely veteran looking at a broken slave and seeing not a thing to be used, but a person to be valued. Seeing not an orc or a woman or a commodity, but a soul worthy of freedom, respect, and love. In that recognition, in that moment of seeing and being seen, two people found salvation. And in sharing that salvation with others, they helped heal a broken world, one heart at a time. That was the true worth of kingdoms, not gold or land or power, but the bonds of love and family and community that made life worth living. Dalton and Skarga understood this in a way few others did, and they spent their lives teaching that lesson to anyone willing to learn. They died within months of each other, both in their 80s, still holding hands, still partners in every way that mattered. Garrett, by then a father himself to 3 children, stood at their graves and told his own children the story of how his parents met. "Your grandfather paid 1 coin for your grandmother at a slave auction," he said. "He freed her immediately, asking nothing in return. She stayed because she saw in him something rare, genuine kindness without expectation of reward." They fell in love, fought for their right to be together, and built a life that changed our entire kingdom. They taught us that every person has infinite worth, regardless of their race or history or circumstances. That is their legacy. That is what we must carry forward. And the children listened, absorbing the lesson, preparing to carry it into their own time. The work was never finished. Each generation had to choose anew whether to embrace love or fear, acceptance or hatred. But Dalton and Skarga had shown the way, lighting a path that others could follow. Their farm remained in the family, a place where humans and orcs still lived and worked together in peace. Pilgrims came from across the kingdom and beyond to see where the legendary couple had lived, to stand in the fields they had worked side by side, to visit the graves where they rested together. And always, the story was told. He bid 1 coin for the orc woman nobody wanted. When she spoke, he knew she was worth kingdoms, and in proving that truth, they changed the world.